This video is for educational and infotainment purposes only. It is not intended to encourage or glorify the use of illegal drugs, violence, or criminal activity in any way. Operating as one of the world's most powerful drug barons and a leader of the Sinaloa drug cartel, Ismael Zambada Garcia, aka El Mayo, had evaded law enforcement for over 50 years, which makes it all the more strange that in July of 2024, he would fly from Mexico to an airport near El Paso, where U.S. DEA agents were waiting to take him into custody. Did he voluntarily turn himself in, or was he betrayed by other cartel leadership? Well, you're about to find out. I'm Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you are watching Lawyer Up. This is episode 6 of the arrest and trial of El Mayo. In this episode, we will be discussing the 3 theories behind El Mayo's mysterious arrest in the United States. And the debate over those theories is relevant because almost without fail, violence follows the loss of a major cartel boss as the various factions try to seize control in the power vacuum that follows. And in this case, there is reason to believe that there could be internal conflict with the Sinaloa cartel based upon circumstances of El Mayo's arrest. Now, to fully understand the dynamics of the situation, a little background is in order. So since about 1995, the Sinaloa cartel has been primarily run by 2 men, Ismael Zambada Garcia, aka El Mayo, and Joaquin Guzman Loera, aka El Chapo, with several of their sons once they became of age acting as lieutenants within the organization. In 2016, El Chapo would be extradited to the U.S. and imprisoned for good. So several of his sons, known as Los Chapitos, stepped into their father's leadership role with the cartel. They would share leadership responsibilities for several years along with El Mayo. That was until El Mayo was arrested. Now his sons, or son to be exact, will be formally stepping into his leadership role. So Los Chapitos will be running the cartel with Los Mayitos. Over the years, the 9 kids that originally made up these 2 groups has been whittled down to 3 individuals. Ivan Archivaldo Guzman Salazar, Jesus Alfredo Guzman Salazar, they are on Chapito's side. And then we have Ismael Zambada Sicarios, aka Mayito Flaco, on El Mayo's side. Now, how they got from 9 kids to 3 kids in leadership is the subject of episode 5 in this series, so check that out if you are interested. So, the big question right now is, what is the current relationship between the Chapitos, Ivan and Jesus, and Mayito Flaco, following allegations that Joaquin Guzman Lopez, who is a Chapito, that he betrayed El Mayo in connection with their arrest in the United States. And that depends on which theory behind the arrest that you believe. And the theories are as follows. Number 1, that El Mayo voluntarily boarded a plane and voluntarily surrendered to U.S. authorities. There is theory number 2, that he was betrayed by Joaquin Guzman Lopez, El Chapo's son, and he was duped into voluntarily boarding a plane that was headed to the U.S. and awaiting DEA agents. And then there's theory number 3, that he was physically kidnapped by Joaquin Guzman and his enforcers and forced onto the plane and then involuntarily flown to the U.S. So which is it? Well, let's look at the evidence. So what evidence is there to support the theory that this was a voluntary surrender by El Mayo? Well, first and foremost, there has been no violence between Los Chapitos and Los Mayitos following his arrest. Mexican President Andrés Manuel López Obrador has stated publicly, quote, We all know that these are groups that have been involved in illicit activities for years. They are the most famous in the country, so to speak. And yet, even through this delicate matter, there has been no confrontations between them, end quote. In addition, Jose Luis Gonzalez Meza, who for years has presented himself as El Chapo's family's lawyer, came out recently to quell rumors of an alleged betrayal and stated that El Mayo was a voluntary surrender. In a brief statement, he assured that the relationship between both families is, quote, impeccable, and reminded the public that there are several marriages between them with members appointed as godparents to each other's children. And the hypothesis has grown that El Mayo, whose health is reported to be seriously deteriorating, planned his succession to cushion the blow of his departure that would otherwise have affected the operational structure. Quote, if this had happened a year ago, I would say it would have meant a drastic change in the geopolitics of drug trafficking in Mexico. But I think Zambada had considered the possibility of retiring for health reasons and giving himself up. That quote comes from a national security analyst, David Salcido. U.S. court records detail that El Mayo has spent years grooming his sons for succession. Quote, unlike Los Chapitos, El Mayo has tried to ensure that his children do not have a life that resembles that of influencers, that they keep a low profile, and that they stay away from scandals, says one DEA agent. But after 3 of his 4 sons were arrested and then cooperated with prosecutors, details of that are in episode 5 of this series, that mantle has fallen to Mayito Flaco, who is on the DEA's list of most wanted fugitives and has been under U.S. scrutiny for years. Finally, there is the line in El Mayo's letter where he called for peace to be maintained in Sinaloa and for violent reactions to be avoided. Quote, we have all been down that road in the past and we all lost out. So the flip side of that theory is that this wasn't voluntary at all, and that the relationship between Los Chapitos and Los Mayitos may have been deteriorating for years. U.S. anti-narcotics forces have claimed for months that tensions between the two groups, one linked to Zambada and the other to El Chapo, has increased. An open secret fueled by the ambition of El Chapo's sons, who took the lead following their father's extradition in 2017. Now, while Ovidio is now in custody in the United States, Ivan Archivaldo and Jesus Alfredo Guzman remain at large, and they have a reputation for being more ambitious and impulsive than El Mayo prefers. It has been said that El Mayo preferred the more mild-mannered Joaquin Guzman Lopez, his godson, which is why many argue that El Mayo would not have suspected Joaquin was up to no good when he allegedly set him up to board that plane that landed on U.S. soil. Zambada's lawyer has spoken directly of the betrayal and kidnapping at the hands of El Chapo's son. Perez claimed that Guzman Lopez kidnapped and then brought Zambada to the United States in an effort to get a better plea agreement with U.S. authorities. Quote, my client neither surrendered nor negotiated any terms with the U.S. government, Perez would say in a statement. Quote, Joaquin Guzman Lopez forcibly kidnapped my client. He was ambushed, thrown to the ground, and handcuffed by 6 men in military uniforms and Joaquin, end quote. His attorney would add that his legs were tied and a black bag was placed over his head. He was then thrown into the back of a pickup truck and taken to a landing strip. There he was forced onto a plane. His legs were tied to the seat by Joaquin, and he was brought to the U.S. against his will. The only people on the plane were the pilot, Joaquin, and my client, end quote. The U.S. ambassador to Mexico, Ken Salazar, has also stated publicly that El Mayo was, quote, taken against his will, end quote, and that no Americans were involved in the operation in Mexico. The drug lord's son turned in his dad's partner, said Salazar. El Mayo's own jailhouse letter also states that he did not voluntarily come to the United States, nor does he have any agreement with U.S. authorities. In his letter, he stated that he was invited by Joaquin Guzman Lopez to attend a meeting of politicians, including the governor of Sinaloa. Once there, he was led into a dark room and ambushed by a group of men, knocked down, hooded, handcuffed with zip ties, and then forced onto a plane. Mayo further claimed that his security detail is MIA and that one of the politicians was gunned down in the escapade. So that information would lead you to believe that El Mayo was kidnapped. But wait, there is a third theory that he was merely duped into boarding the plane and that there was no physical force involved at all. In fact, the formal statement from the U.S. government was that Joaquin tricked El Mayo into boarding the plane and flying to the U.S. This theory argues that delivering El Mayo was a condition of a plea agreement between Joaquin and U.S. attorneys. But Joaquin Guzman's attorney has said publicly, quote, there is no deal with U.S. authorities and that El Mayo is just auditioning as a snitch. So, which theory is correct? Well, who the hell knows? I can tell you this. People involved in the drug trade in Mexico are bracing for violence within the Sinaloa cartel. We will have full details about the potential internal explosion of the Sinaloa cartel in the next episode as we hear from sources that have actually interviewed drug traffickers with first-hand knowledge of the conflict. That's all for today. Make sure you subscribe to the channel to get all of the updates regarding this and other cartel matters. My name is Joshua Roberts, attorney at law, and you've been watching Lawyer Up.